Of all the strange cases which my friend Mr. Sherlock Holmes was called upon to investigate during our long and intimate acquaintance, there were few which presented such singular features at the outset, and yet resolved themselves from circumstances so deeply and tragically human, as that which I have catalogued in my notes as the adventure of the tall man. The affair took place in the autumn of 1895, a season of swirling fogs and dripping eaves which kept us confined for the most part to our snug quarters in Baker Street. Holmes had been in one of his silent, introspective moods for several days, the legacy of a particularly taxing case involving the Bank of England, and the reek of his powerful shag tobacco was a constant presence in our rooms. I had just laid aside the lancet, fearing that any attempt at conversation would be met with a curt dismissal, when our page, Billy, announced a visitor. "Dr. Leslie Armstrong," he said, presenting a card upon a silver salver. Holmes, who had been slumped in his armchair, a picture of lassitude, straightened at once. A flicker of interest, the first I had seen in days, lit his keen grey eyes. "Armstrong?" he mused, taking the card. "The name is not unfamiliar. A man of medicine from Cambridge, if I am not mistaken. A rising star in the study of pathological anatomy. Show him up, Billy." Our visitor was a man of some 40 years, trim and well-dressed, with a clean-shaven, ascetic face that bespoke a life of academic discipline. His features were handsome, but marred by a pronounced pallor and a nervous tension that was palpable from the moment he stepped into the room. His eyes, dark and intelligent, darted about, taking in every detail of our cluttered sitting room before they finally settled upon my companion. "Mr. Sherlock Holmes?" he asked, his voice steady but strained. "I am he, and this is my friend and colleague Dr. Watson. Pray take a seat. You appear to be labouring under some great agitation, Doctor. A chill October wind, perhaps, or something more personal?" Dr. Armstrong sank into the chair Holmes indicated, though he perched on its edge as if ready to spring up at any moment. He clasped and unclasped his gloved hands, his gaze fixed upon Holmes's impassive face. "Mr. Holmes, I have come to you because I am at my wit's end. I am a man of science, a man who deals in facts and tangible evidence. The situation in which I find myself is, well, it is utterly beyond my comprehension, and frankly, it is destroying my nerve." "Proceed," said Holmes, steepling his long, thin fingers. "For the past 2 months," our client began, lowering his voice, "I have been the subject of a most bizarre and persistent persecution. I am being followed, stalked, Mr. Holmes, by a man of the most intimidating and grotesque appearance." "Describe him," Holmes said, his eyes half closed, yet I knew that every nuance of the man's speech was being filed away in that extraordinary brain. "He is a giant," Dr. Armstrong said, a shudder passing through his frame. "He must be well over 6 feet and 4 inches in height, with a breadth of shoulder to match. His face is weathered and coarse, framed by a thick dark beard, and he has the shambling gait of a labourer. He dresses in rough country tweeds and carries a formidable walking stick, a gnarled piece of blackthorn that looks more like a cudgel. But it is not his size alone that is so unnerving. It is his persistence and the sheer malignity of his purpose." "You are certain of this malignity?" Holmes inquired softly. "Has he made any threat? Attempted any violence?" "No," Armstrong admitted, "and that is the heart of the matter's strangeness. His actions are those of a ghost, a phantom haunting my steps. He appears at a distance when I walk from my home to the university laboratories. I have seen his colossal form looming in the evening mist on the backs. Twice, Mr. Holmes, I have looked up from my desk in my study at night to see his face, pressed against the glass of my window, his eyes burning into me from the darkness. The moment I react, he is gone, melting back into the night as if he were never there. And you have no notion as to his identity or his motives? None whatsoever. I have racked my brain, reviewed every aspect of my life, personal and professional. I am a quiet man, Mr. Holmes, a bachelor devoted to my work. My circle is small, confined to my colleagues at the university. I have no enemies that I know of. I have no debts. My life is an open book. A book, perhaps, with a page or two stuck together, Holmes murmured. Tell me, Doctor, what was your immediate reaction to these visitations? At first, annoyance. Then, as it continued, a growing sense of unease. Now it is stark terror. My work is suffering. I'm unable to concentrate, starting at every shadow. I feel as though I am being hunted, toyed with by some monstrous creature before it decides to strike. I went to the constabulary in Cambridge, of course. And they were, as ever, immensely helpful? Holmes asked, a faint trace of irony in his tone. They were dismissive, Armstrong said with a bitter sigh. They sent a constable to patrol my street. They saw nothing. They suggested it was a prank by a student, or that I was overwrought from my work. They asked if the man had done anything. When I told them he had only looked at me, they practically laughed me out of the station. They told me to come back when a crime had been committed. I fear, Mr. Holmes, that by the time a crime is committed, it will be far too late for me to seek their aid. Holmes sat silent for a few moments, the smoke from his pipe curling up towards the ceiling in a blue-grey spiral. This is a most singular problem, he said at last. A persecution without action, a threat without a word spoken. Tell me, Doctor, on the occasions when this man has been close, at your window, for instance, have you observed any details about his person? A scar? A tattoo? Any item of jewellery? Dr. Armstrong frowned in concentration. The light was poor, and his face was shadowed by the brim of a rough cap. But yes, now that you mention it, there was something. On his left hand, the one gripping the window ledge, I saw a ring, a broad silver band of a peculiar design. It looked almost serpentine. A serpent? Interesting. And his hands themselves? Rough, calloused. The nails were broken, the hands of a man who works with the soil. And the mud on his boots? Have you had occasion to observe it? Mud? The doctor asked, perplexed. Mr. Holmes, I confess I was more concerned with the man himself than the state of his footwear. A frequent oversight, said Holmes, and often a fatal one. The various soils of England, from the red marl of Devon to the black loam of the fens, are as distinctive to the trained eye as the dialects of her people. It is a language every detective ought to master. Now, Doctor, I have one more question, and I must implore you to answer it with absolute candour. What happened precisely 1 week before this persecution began? Dr. Armstrong looked utterly taken aback. A week before? Nothing of any consequence. I delivered a lecture on cellular degeneration. I dined at my college. My life continued its unvarying routine. Nothing at all out of the ordinary. No new acquaintance, no strange correspondence, no journey taken. No, absolutely nothing, the doctor asserted, though I fancied I saw a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Holmes rose from his chair, his lethargy vanished. replaced by the quiet, intense energy that signified the game was afoot. "Very well, Dr. Armstrong. Your case presents features of considerable interest. I cannot promise a swift solution, but I am willing to look into the matter. Watson and I shall travel to Cambridge tomorrow. It is essential that you return and behave in all respects as you normally would. Do not vary your routine. Above all, do not let this man know that you have sought my assistance. Should you see him again, make no sign. We must give him rope and see if he will hang himself with it." After our client had departed, still pale and trembling, Holmes moved to the window and stared down into the bustling thoroughfare of Baker Street. "Well, Watson, what do you make of it?" he asked, without turning. "A terrifying ordeal for the poor man," I said with conviction. "A lunatic, perhaps, who has fixed upon him for some insane reason. This giant sounds like a formidable brute." "He does indeed," Holmes replied, turning from the window, his eyes bright with intellectual excitement. "Formidable in size and formidable in purpose. But it is not the giant that interests me most, my dear fellow." "No? What then?" "It is our client, Dr. Leslie Armstrong, the man of science, the man of facts. Did you observe the slight hesitation when I asked him about the week preceding these events? Did you note the way his hand strayed to his watch chain? A classic gesture of a man seeking a moment to compose his thoughts before delivering a falsehood. Our good doctor has not been entirely honest with us, Watson. He is keeping something back, and I suspect that in that concealed detail lies the entire solution to this bizarre puzzle. The following morning found us rattling along in a first-class carriage of the Great Eastern Railway, bound for the ancient university town of Cambridge. The grey skies and damp air of London gave way to the flat, expansive landscapes of East Anglia, a vista of ploughed fields and skeletal trees under a watery sun. Holmes was in high spirits, discoursing upon topics as varied as the polyphonic motets of Lassus and the potential for using plaster of Paris to preserve the impressions of bicycle tires in soft earth. Upon our arrival, we secured rooms at a respectable inn near the market square, and after a light luncheon we set out for the address Dr. Armstrong had given us. His residence was a handsome Queen Anne house in a quiet street, its sober brick facade overlooking a neatly kept garden, now mournful with the decay of autumn. A high brick wall enclosed the property, offering a considerable degree of privacy. "The doctor values his seclusion," Holmes remarked, his eyes scanning the wall, the gate and the windows of the house. "Let us first examine the scene of the phantom's most audacious appearances, the study window." We gained access to the rear of the house via a narrow lane. The garden was soft and damp underfoot. Holmes moved with the silent tread of a hunting cat, his gaze sweeping the ground, the flower beds and the wall. The study was a ground-floor room with a large sash window, which, as Armstrong had described, looked out onto a patch of lawn. "Here," Holmes said, pointing. "This is the spot. The persecutor would have stood here, his face to the glass." He crouched down, producing his powerful magnifying lens from his pocket. "Ah, Watson, we are in luck. The recent rain has served us well." In the soft soil of the flower bed directly beneath the window, two immense footprints were clearly visible. They were not merely large, they were gargantuan, the imprint of a boot that seemed almost inhuman in its proportions. Holmes's examination was minute and painstaking. He measured the prints with a tape. He scraped a small sample of the caked mud from the edge of one impression into a tin box. Finally, he scrutinized the window ledge and the surrounding brickwork. "The doctor's description was accurate," he said, straightening up. "Our man is of a remarkable stature. Furthermore, he is strong and agile. To press one's face to this window requires one to lean over this bed of prize-winning roses. See here, not a single stem is broken. He is no clumsy brute, this giant. He moves with care." "But what of the mud, Holmes?" I asked. "The mud is a black peaty loam, quite distinct from the chalky clay of the Cambridge environs. It suggests he comes from the fens, those vast misty flatlands to the north. It is also mixed with something else. See these tiny fragments of decomposed vegetable matter and what appears to be, yes, sedge. He is a man of the marshes, Watson." Our next step was to call upon Dr. Armstrong himself, whom we found in his laboratory at the university. A stark, white-tiled room filled with microscopes, glass jars containing unnerving specimens, and the faint, acrid smell of formaldehyde. He seemed surprised and a little flustered to see us, and I had the distinct impression that he had half regretted his impulsive visit to London. "Mr. Holmes, I did not expect you so soon." "Time is of the essence in such matters, Doctor," Holmes said breezily. "I have examined the ground beneath your study window. Our man has been there, just as you described. I wonder, has anything of a similar nature occurred in your professional life? Here, at the university?" Armstrong's face tightened. "I do not see the relevance. My work is purely academic." "Humour me," Holmes insisted. "Have you had any disagreements? Any students you have had to discipline? Any professional rivalries?" "None that would provoke such an outlandish campaign of terror," he said stiffly. "And your personal effects?" Holmes continued, his gaze drifting around the laboratory. "Has anything ever been disturbed? Anything gone missing from your home or your rooms here, however trivial?" The doctor hesitated for a fraction of a second too long. "No, nothing." "Indeed," Holmes said, his voice smooth as silk. "Well, we shall not trouble you further at present. We intend to keep a watch on your house tonight. With any luck, our phantom may favour us with an appearance." As we left the hallowed precincts of the university, Holmes was quiet and thoughtful. "Our doctor is a most unsatisfactory witness, Watson," he commented as we walked back towards our inn. "He lies, and he lies poorly. He is a man terrified, yet his terror seems mingled with something else. Guilt, perhaps? He is not merely the victim in this affair. He is a participant. He knows more than he is telling. Of that I am certain." That evening, as dusk settled over the ancient towers and quadrangles of Cambridge, we took up our positions. We concealed ourselves in the deep shadows of an archway across the street from Dr. Armstrong's house, a vantage point that gave us a clear view of the front gate and the darkened windows. The hours passed slowly. A cold, damp mist crept up from the river, muffling the sound of distant chapel bells and blurring the yellow glow of the gas lamps. It was close to midnight when our patience was rewarded. From the gloom at the far end of the street, a figure emerged. Even at a distance, his colossal height was unmistakable. He moved with a long, shambling stride, yet with a strange silence for a man of his bulk. He was dressed, as Armstrong had described, in rough country clothes and carried a thick, gnarled stick. He did not approach the house directly, but paused in the shadows of a large elm tree, standing perfectly still, a gigantic statue of patient menace. He was watching the house, his attention fixed upon the lighted window of the study where Dr. Armstrong was, presumably, at his work. "Now, Watson, we must be cautious," Holmes whispered, his voice a low thrum of excitement. "Follow me and do exactly as I do. We must not startle him." We slipped out from our hiding place and, keeping to the darkest shadows, began to make our way down the street, intending to circle around and approach him from behind. But we had underestimated the man's senses. Like some wild creature of the fens, he seemed to detect our presence. He turned his head sharply, and for a moment his gaze swept over our position. Then, with a sudden, swift movement, he turned and strode away, vanishing into the labyrinth of misty lanes as silently as he had appeared. "Confound it!" Holmes exclaimed, striking the damp pavement with his boot. "He is as wary as a fox. But we have seen him, Watson. We have confirmed his existence, and tomorrow the hunt begins in earnest." The following day, Holmes was a whirlwind of activity. He spent the morning at the local land registry office and the afternoon dispatching a flurry of telegrams. He returned to our inn in the evening, rubbing his hands together with satisfaction. "I believe I am beginning to see the shape of this business, Watson," he announced. "My inquiries have borne fruit. I have discovered the identity of a man of gigantic stature who owns a small holding in the heart of the fens, a man who left his home some 2 months ago for reasons unknown. His name is Jonas Oldacre." "And you believe he is our man, Holmes?" "I am almost certain of it. The description matches, as does the peaty soil from his boots. But the motive, Watson, the motive is everything. Why should a reclusive fen-dweller come to Cambridge to persecute a respected academic? The answer, I am convinced, lies with Dr. Armstrong and the secret he is so determined to conceal. Our chance to test this theory came sooner than we expected. A little after 9 o'clock, a frantic knock came at the door of our rooms. It was Dr. Armstrong, his face ashen, his composure completely shattered. "He has been inside my house, Mr. Holmes," he gasped, staggering into the room. "Inside? Calm yourself, Doctor, and tell us precisely what has occurred." "I was at the college, dining at high table. I returned less than an hour ago. The front door was locked, as I had left it. But on my desk, in my study, this was lying there." He held out a trembling hand. Lying on his palm was a small, desiccated object. It was a withered flower, a wild marsh orchid, its petals brown and brittle with age. Holmes took the flower and examined it with intense concentration. "This is of the utmost significance," he said gravely. "He has breached your fortress, Doctor. This is no longer a passive haunting. It is an active intrusion. He is escalating his campaign. Tell me, is anything missing?" Armstrong swallowed hard. "Yes, a photograph. A small, silver-framed photograph that I kept in a locked drawer of my desk. The lock has been forced." "And whose photograph was it?" Holmes's voice was sharp as a razor. Dr. Armstrong's facade of defiant ignorance finally crumbled. He sank into a chair and buried his face in his hands. "It was a photograph of a woman," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "Her name? Eleanor Clayton." Holmes stood over him, his face stern and implacable. "Dr. Armstrong, the time for prevarication is over. You have endangered yourself and obstructed my investigation by withholding the truth. I must know in every detail what connection you had with this Miss Clayton, and why her photograph should be the one thing this man, Jonas Oldacre would risk entering your house to steal. The doctor's confession, when it came, was a torrent of guilt and fear that had clearly been suppressed for years. He told his story in broken phrases, his scientific detachment stripped away to reveal a man tormented by his past. "It was 15 years ago," he began, his voice hoarse. "I was a young physician just starting my career. I took a locum position in a small isolated village in the Fens. It was there I met her. Eleanor was the local schoolmistress. She was a creature of light, Watson. Intelligent, gentle, beautiful. I was utterly captivated. We fell deeply in love." He paused, lost in the memory. "But she was frail. She suffered from a peculiar ailment that baffled the local practitioners. She had periods of extreme fatigue, palpitations of the heart, and a strange pallor. I was arrogant, Watson, full of the confidence of youth and a Cambridge education. I believed I could diagnose what others could not. I examined her, and I concluded that she was suffering from a rare cardiac condition. I prescribed a course of treatment, heavy doses of digitalis." Here he broke down completely, and it was some minutes before he could continue. "My treatment, it made her worse. Far worse. Her decline was rapid and terrible. I was in a panic. I realized I had made a dreadful error, that my diagnosis was wrong. Her symptoms were not consistent with my initial assessment. I now believe she suffered from a pernicious anemia, a condition little understood at the time. The digitalis I was administering was, in effect, a poison to her weakened system. But I was afraid, Mr. Holmes. My career was just beginning. An admission of such a catastrophic failure would have ruined me. And so I did nothing. I continued the treatment, knowing it was wrong. I stood by and watched her die." The room was silent, save for the man's ragged sobs. Holmes's face was a mask of cold anger. "You allowed your ambition to outweigh your duty, both as a doctor and as a man," he said, his voice cutting. "And what of this Jonas Oldacre?" "He was her brother," Armstrong whispered. "Her older brother, a giant of a man, fiercely protective of her. He worked the land, a simple, uneducated man who adored his sister. He never trusted me. He questioned my treatment, my diagnosis. He saw his sister weakening before his very eyes and blamed me. When she died, his grief was terrible. He accused me of killing her. There was a dreadful scene at the funeral. He swore he would never forget that one day he would see justice done. I left the village the next day, and I have never been back. I have spent the last 15 years trying to forget, building my career, burying myself in my work. I thought I had left that ghost behind." "Ghosts have a habit of returning," Holmes said grimly. "And Oldacre is no ghost. He is a man with a 15-year-old grievance. But why now, Doctor? What has happened to resurrect this old tragedy?" "I don't know," Armstrong cried. "Unless, oh my God, her diary." "Tell me." "Eleanor kept a detailed diary. She wrote in it every day, her hopes, her fears, and her symptoms. She recorded everything I said, every dose of medicine I administered. After she died, Oldacre took all of her possessions. If he has only now, after all these years, read that diary, or had someone read it to him, he would see the truth. He would have the proof of my incompetence, my negligence. He would have the proof that you killed his sister." Holmes corrected him, his voice like a chip of ice. "The photograph he stole, it was of Eleanor?" "Yes, it was the only one I had." The pieces of the puzzle clicked into place with a dreadful final clarity. The long, patient stalking was not the prelude to a physical attack. It was a campaign of psychological warfare, a haunting conceived by a grieving brother. The appearances at the window, the looming presence in the fog, were all designed to break Armstrong's nerve, to force him to confront the memory he had tried to bury. The stolen photograph and the withered marsh orchid, a flower that no doubt grew near Eleanor's home, were symbols, messages from the past, reminders of the woman he had loved and betrayed. "He does not want to murder you, Doctor," Holmes said, his expression grim. "He wants to destroy you. He wants you to suffer as his sister suffered. He is driving you to the edge of madness, and I dare say he is succeeding." "What am I to do, Mr. Holmes?" Armstrong pleaded. "For now, you will return to your home and lock your doors. Watson and I will deal with Mr. Oldacre. The time has come to confront the hunter." Leaving the terrified doctor in his house, Holmes and I set off at once. My friend had a street map of Cambridge, and he had already marked a small, disreputable-looking public house near the railway yards. If a man from the Fens wishes to remain inconspicuous in Cambridge, he will not choose a respectable inn, Holmes explained as we hurried through the dark, misty streets. He will seek out a place frequented by drovers, farmers and labourers. The landlord of the Ploughman's Rest matches the description of a man who received one of my telegrams this afternoon. I believe we shall find our quarry there. The Ploughman's Rest was a squalid, noisy establishment, thick with the smoke of cheap tobacco and the smell of stale ale. A score of rough-looking men were crowded around the bar. In a dark corner, hunched over a pint of beer, sat a man who could only be our quarry. Jonas Oldacre was even larger than I had imagined, a true behemoth. His great shoulders slumped in what looked like weary sorrow. His tangled beard rested on his chest, and his huge calloused hands were wrapped around his tankard. On his left hand I saw the glint of a broad, silver serpentine ring. Holmes walked directly to his table. "Mr. Jonas Oldacre," he said, his voice calm and clear. The giant looked up. His eyes, set deep in his weathered face, were not the eyes of a madman or a killer. They were filled with a profound and bottomless grief. He said nothing, but merely watched us, his expression wary. "My name is Sherlock Holmes. I have been engaged by Dr. Leslie Armstrong. I think it is time that you and I had a talk." For a moment I thought the man would spring to his feet. A dark fire flared in his eyes, but then it died, replaced by a look of utter weariness. He gestured with his massive head towards the bench opposite him. "Sit," he rumbled, his voice low and deep as the tolling of a distant bell. We sat. The noise of the tavern seemed to fade into the background. "So, the coward sent for a detective?" Oldacre said, his lip curling in a sneer. "He hasn't the courage to face me himself?" "He is a man living in terror," Holmes replied evenly. "Good," the giant said with savage satisfaction. "Let him know what terror is. Let him lie awake at night, listening for a footstep on the stair. Let him see a face in every shadow. It is no less than he deserves. It is no less than what my Eleanor suffered." He reached into the deep pocket of his tweed coat and produced 2 items. One was the silver-frame photograph of a beautiful, sensitive-looking young woman. The other was a small, leather-bound book. "This is her," he said, his rough voice softening as he gazed at the photograph. "My girl, and this is her diary. I cannot read, Mr. Holmes, not a word." For 15 years, this book has sat in her trunk. But 2 months ago, the new vicar's wife, she offered to read it to me. She read me my Eleanor's words, and I learned how he killed her. His great hand clenched into a fist that could have shattered the oak table. It is all there. How he gave her the medicine. How she grew weaker every day. How she told him it was making her sick, and he told her to trust him. He watched her fade away. He murdered her as surely as if he had put a knife in her heart. "And you came here to seek justice?" Holmes asked. "What justice is there for a man like me against a man like him?" Oldacre said bitterly. "The law? The law is for gentlemen. I knew that. So I decided to seek my own justice. I wanted to haunt him. I wanted to be his guilty conscience, come to life. I wanted to see his face every day and remind him of what he did. I wanted to break him, to see him look in the mirror and see a killer, just as I do." It was a strange and terrible confession delivered in that sordid tavern. Here was the resolution to our singular case. Not a tale of common crime, but a tragedy of love, ambition, and a long-delayed, heartbreaking revenge. "Your grievance is just, Mr. Oldacre," Holmes said, his voice softer now. "Dr. Armstrong committed a grievous wrong, one for which he can never truly atone. But this path you are on leads only to ruin. Your campaign of terror is against the law. If you persist, you will find yourself in the dock, and the truth of your sister's story will be lost in the scandal of your own actions." The giant stared into his beer, his shoulders slumped. "Then what am I to do? Let him go free. Let him live out his life in comfort with his fine house and his reputation, while my Eleanor lies in a cold grave." "No," said Holmes. "There is another way. You will give me that diary and that photograph. You will return to your home in the Fens, and you will leave Dr. Armstrong to his conscience and to me. I give you my word that justice of a kind will be done." For a long time, Jonas Oldacre sat in silence, wrestling with his hatred and his grief. At last, with a deep, shuddering sigh, he pushed the diary and the photograph across the table. "Do what you will," he said, his voice heavy with defeat. "My heart is broken. It has been broken for 15 years. He rose, a great tragic figure, and without another word shambled out of the tavern and was lost to the night. Our final interview with Dr. Leslie Armstrong took place the next morning in his study. Holmes placed the diary and the photograph on the polished mahogany desk. At the sight of them, all the colour drained from the doctor's face. "Oldacre has gone," Holmes said. "He will not trouble you again. He has left these with me as a testament to his sister's fate." Armstrong stared at the items, his face a mask of misery. What will you do?" he stammered. "What you should have done 15 years ago," Holmes replied, his voice ringing with authority. "There can be no legal redress here. Too much time has passed, and the evidence is circumstantial. A public scandal would only cause more pain. But a man's life is not lived in a courtroom alone. It is lived in the court of his own soul. You built your career upon the grave of a woman who loved you. You have lived a lie, and the wealth and reputation you have gained are rotten to the core." He picked up the diary. "This record of your failure will remain with me. So long as you live, it will exist. Your secret is not your own any longer. But I will offer you a chance at redemption. You are a man of science with knowledge that could save lives. I suggest you devote the rest of your career to that end. Establish a foundation for the study of the very illness you failed to diagnose. Dedicate your work to the memory of Eleanor Clayton. Let her death be the cause of life for others. It is the only form of justice that has any meaning now." Dr. Armstrong did not reply. He sat at his desk, his head bowed, a broken man. The photograph of the lovely young woman seemed to gaze at him with a look of sorrowful reproach. "Come, Watson," Holmes said quietly, turning for the door. "Our work here is done." As our train sped back towards London, carrying us away from the ancient spires of Cambridge, Holmes was for a long time silent, gazing out at the passing fields. "A sad business, Watson," he remarked at last. "One of the saddest I have ever been involved in. There are some crimes which the law cannot touch, and some punishments which a prison cannot inflict. Dr. Armstrong will serve a life sentence, confined within the walls of his own guilt. In some ways I pity him almost as much as I pity the tragic figure of Jonas Oldacre." "And yet, Holmes," I said, "you have, as always, brought light into the darkness." He shook his head, and a rare, melancholy smile touched his thin lips. "There is no light here, my dear Watson," he said. "Only varying shades of grey.